If you've been playing online poker for a while, you've almost certainly heard about Ultimate Bet and Absolute Poker. This is because these two organizations and poker sites were implicated in what is still considered the biggest scandal in the world of online poker to date. The two separate scandals occurred in the first decade of the 21st century, with both sites eventually going bankrupt and leaving millions of dollars in debt to the players. If you were too young to remember or just weren't involved in poker at the time, let's take a journey down memory lane and reflect on how it all happened. We've made a detailed summary of both scandals, the site closures, and the fallout. Sit back and digest this vital lesson about the potential dangers of online gambling. Ultimate Bet was established when internet poker was still somewhat unknown. In reality, it emerged prior to the late 1990s poker craze. John Carl and Greg Pearson founded IE Logic, a small technology startup. The company's initial purpose was to develop software for massively multiplayer online games, or MMOs. However, this swiftly changed. In the early 2000s, IE Logic developed gambling software, which served as the foundation for the original Ultimate Bet poker platform. Russ Hamilton, a moderately well-known poker pro, persuaded Pearson to create this platform, which would cater to a small group of poker players from Las Vegas and elsewhere. The site was first created in 2001, and the Kahnawake Gaming Commission in Canada granted it permission to operate. This commission, of course, had no real legal standing in the United States. Nevertheless, the site went live and players rushed to it. With Annie Duke and Phil Hellmuth supporting it, several poker pros rapidly began to play on the platform. This was fantastic news for Hamilton and Pearson, as their company had been doing well from the start. Ultimate Bet began hosting live Texas Hold'em events as well, with many well-known professionals such as Freddie Deeb and Eric Lindgren winning titles in the early days. Ultimate Bet's breaking point came in 2006 when the US government adopted the UIGEA. At this point, Ultimate Bet's parent business was publicly traded on the London Stock Exchange, which was problematic. Things began to spiral when the company was sold to Taquero Enterprises ENRG, which was owned by Joe Norton, the Grand Chief of the Kahnawake tribe. This effectively gave Ultimate Bet and eventually Absolute Poker ownership of the tribe. Absolute Poker, like Ultimate Bet, got its beginnings in the early 2000s. This online poker service was founded in 2003 by a group of students from the University of Montana. The business plan appeared wonderful, so they relocated their company to Costa Rica to avoid the legal limits of the United States. Absolute Poker, like Ultimate Bet, is licensed by the KGC. Absolute Poker was not particularly successful in its early years, but when the UIGEA took effect and many competitors fled the US market, AP survived. This meant that AP would become one of America's largest poker sites overnight. However, little more than a year after its launch, the site was struck by the Absolute Poker scandal. In late 2007, the poker forums were inundated with rumors of possible foul play on the site. These were not your typical rants about terrible beats, but rather legitimate complaints about certain players. One particular name stood out. The player known by the nickname Pot Ripper produced results that defied math, logic, and common sense. A player going by the moniker Crazy Marco requested hand histories for one of his tournaments, and the site accidentally handed him the master hand history, proving his charges. Not only was Pot Ripper playing in ways that defied logic, but he was also based in Costa Rica, with a spectator at each of his tables. The implications were obvious. A super user account was providing Pot Ripper with knowledge on his opponent's hole cards. The site initially denied the charges, but eventually confessed that there was foul play involved, though they never explicitly accepted responsibility for it. The Absolute Poker scandal is still not entirely resolved to this day. A few months after the events at Absolute Poker, Ultimate Bet was rocked by a similar scandal. It is well worth mentioning that by this point, both sites had joined the Serious Poker Network, which is owned by the Kahnawake tribe's Grand Chief. This time, a player going by the name Neo Neo was the suspect, as his results appeared to mirror those of Pot Ripper at Absolute Poker just months before. Ultimate Bet, like Absolute Poker, later confessed that there was some foul play going on, and several accounts and players were implicated. After all was said and done, the ring appeared to rely on information collected by someone going by the handle Audit Monster 2, who had the capacity to see player hole cards across all tables. Ultimate Bet made a statement in May 2008 confirming that cheating had been going on for more than a year, and the KGC penalized the company $1.5 million. Despite the business admitting to the Ultimate Bet scam and being punished by the KGC, many players had lost trust in the Serious Poker Network by this point. and Phil Hellmuth and Annie Duke's reputations suffered greatly. April 15, 2011 will be remembered as the worst day ever for online poker. On that day, the American Department of Justice decided to shut down some of the largest poker sites still functioning in the United States. This included PokerStars, Full Tilt Poker, and Absolute Poker. These domain names and other property related with the sites were confiscated as part of an operation to enforce the Wire Act, UIGEA, and other laws relating to unlawful gambling and money laundering. PokerStars and Full Tilt closed down and did not try to reopen. However, Absolute Poker relaunched under a different domain and continued to serve players in the United States far into 2012. When everything was said and done, the site owed its gamers over $50 million, despite clearly making millions of dollars from the rake over the years. While a few Absolute Poker mid-level employees were fined $300,000, and the company's chief of payment processing, Brent Beckley, was sentenced to 14 months in prison, the overall impact of the scandal was limited. Originally, the Absolute Poker and Ultimate Bet scandals were portrayed as gamers exploiting superuser accounts. But was this actually the case? Since the beginning, there were concerns that someone at the company was misusing the super account, primarily because the super users were based in Costa Rica. Travis McCarr, who had previously worked with Russ Hamilton, revealed a lot of files and materials in 2013 that provided a more complete picture of what happened. Among these was a 3-hour conversation between Hamilton, Pearson, and 2 corporate lawyers. This chat included some very damaging remarks, including Hamilton explicitly admitting that he received approximately $18 million from the scam. The audio files demonstrated how Hamilton bypassed the site's security, acquired access to super user accounts, and utilized them to amass millions for himself. Players that were duped as part of the Absolute Poker and Ultimate Bet poker scams were never reimbursed for their losses. These incidents continue to be among the most serious in the history of online gambling, and the perpetrators are well known. Still, Russ Hamilton and his co-conspirators were never penalized. The funds that Absolute Poker owed its players after Black Friday were partially recovered, with the DOJ repaying around $33.5 million to over 7,000 players affected by the shutdown. The cash was sent through a third-party facilitator named Garden City Group, and other rounds of payments are possible, albeit they appear less likely by the day. Millions more were lost in the process, and many players chose not to file claims for fear of being prosecuted for tax evasion or money laundering due to their association with the companies. These incidents tarnished the reputations of not only Absolute Poker and Ultimate Bet, but also the KGC, which continues to grant gaming licenses to this day. So if you want to gamble online, playing at sites licensed by this institution may be something to reconsider when there are other possibilities available. Tell us what you think about this scandal in the comments below. Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel before you leave.